Now, if we consider for a moment level 2 techniques, these are techniques that target the rational man. We want to change the way people think, so we're going to use a scientific method. That is, we're going to rely on data and evidence, charts and statistics. We may think about the quality of our logic in trying to present ideas. The idea here, of course, is that since the scientific revolution and our in the last 2 centuries growth worldwide in the reliance on and understanding of the functionality of science, that if we apply this in business, that a rational person will be convinced by the presentation of the proper data, the right kind of analysis, the right kind of data. So I wonder, in your own attempts to influence others, what proportion of your attempts rely on this assumption, this belief that if I can just present the right data, the right analysis, any logical adult, rational, mature person will be convinced, must be convinced, have to be convinced by the quality of my analysis and my evidence and my statistics. So many people will say logically and then go on from there. Well, it turns out that rational man may or may not be so rational. Consider, for example, an interesting book by Thomas Kuhn in which he explored the structure of scientific revolutions. He said, let's look at 2 major paradigm shifts in the history of human thought. The first one being when people changed their point of view that the sun revolved around the earth to the point of view from Copernicus and Galileo that the earth revolves around the sun, a dramatic change in assumptions about how the world works. So the question would be, to begin with, how long did it take, not for the general population, but for the scientists of the day, 15th century, to accept Copernicus and Galileo's database that suggested Ptolemy's view that the sun revolved around the earth was in error? Now, again, we could go back and talk about the church's influence on this and influence on the general population, but let's take the scientific community. People who were increasingly becoming confident in and focused on and devoted to data-based conclusions rather than dogmatic-based conclusions. And you might be, well, I don't know, what's your guess? 50 years, 100 years, 200 years? I've heard a variety of guesses over the years. But the answer is 30 years. Now, if you think about it, 30 years in the day was 1 generation. In other words, the old scientists, with their traditional point of view, literally had to die off before the new paradigm became generally accepted in the scientific community. Heated debate during the lifetime of Galileo and Copernicus about what those data might mean. So then you say, well, okay, maybe that was a function of medieval man being not so bright. Let's, in the second half of the book, consider a more recent paradigm shift, moving from Newton's laws of motion to an Einsteinian theory of relativity. And it turns out that the answer is similarly 30 years. So what this points out is that even among scientists, people who have habitual points of view have become steeped in a certain set of assumptions about the way the world operates. Even among the quote-unquote scientific rational man, logic and data and statistics frequently are not enough to overcome deeply embedded level 3 assumptions about the way the world works. So that scientific evidence and data may be perfectly clear and logical to you, and yet when you present that to another person, if their vabes don't agree, if their beliefs and expectations don't match up, they may reject your data, your analysis, your statistics, and your charts. So in the 21st century, you can look at the debate on energy consumption, on global warming, on any number of issues, and find analyses on both sides of the fence, and people who are, one might argue, habitually or dogmatically determined that their point of view is the right one. So level 2 techniques, where you're trying to change the way people think, might on the surface seem to be fairly straightforward and easy to manage, and in the real world it turns out that people's vabes will often distort, deny, or discount data regardless of its source.